AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner Ike Allen and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Donna Anderson, is with us today to talk about senior sociopaths, how to escape and recover from lifelong abusers. Donna is the author of Love Fraud, a website that teaches people to recognize and recover from sociopaths. She learned about sociopaths the hard way by marrying one. Donna is author of 8 books, and her most recent on senior sociopaths, which are disordered individuals age 50 and older. She is also co-author of 2 scientific studies. She founded Love Fraud Education, which offers webinars for survivors and professionals, and has shared her expertise on numerous TV, radio, and online programs. Welcome to AVAIYA, Donna.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so excited to get to know you and your work. And I'm very intrigued by today's topic. This is something that I don't know if we ever have had anyone talk about. So I'm so glad that you're here to talk about it. So how did you personally learn about senior sociopaths?
Well, as you briefly mentioned, I started learning about it the hard way by marrying one. My ex-husband turned out to be a total con artist. He took $250,000 from me. He cheated with more than 6 different women during our 2.5-year relationship. He had a child with one of those women. And then 10 days after I left him, he married the mother of the child, which was the second time he committed bigamy. So needless to say, my head was spinning. And as I was telling my therapist about his outrageous betrayals, she said, he sounds like a sociopath. And I'm like, sociopath? What's that? And started researching it and realized that, yes, he fit the description. And after this experience, I felt that I really needed to talk about what had happened and to tell people about all these essential social predators that are living among us. So that's why I founded lovefraud.com.
Yes, unfortunately, it's amazing how many people who get into like this line of work. Obviously, most people have had really difficult experiences like yours. And I'm curious, like, what is your experience of what a sociopath is as you've learned about it? Like what's the definition of sociopath?
Okay, well, that gets really complicated because it kind of depends on who you ask. There are folks on the research side that keep talking about psychopaths. There are people on the clinical side who talk about specific disorders, antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, and histrionic. The word sociopath is no longer a clinical definition or diagnosis, although it once was. But when the word was coined, it originally meant anything deviated or pathological in social relations. And so that's the way I use the term on Love Fraud. I use the word sociopath as an umbrella for all of these various disorders, which are antisocial, narcissistic, borderline, histrionic, and psychopathic personality disorders. And the reason I do that is because they're all bad news. You know, what these folks have in common is that they make life miserable for the rest of us. And from the point of view of the target, which was me and maybe you and maybe a lot of your listeners, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It matters if you're a therapist trying to treat them. But for those of us on the receiving end of this awful behavior, it doesn't matter. We just need to know that all of them are out there and that we need to protect ourselves from them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so let's talk about it as it relates to specifically what we're talking about today, right? The senior sociopath. So are you saying that there are, right, senior citizens who are manipulating people, exploiting people, hurting people? I mean, I would imagine yes, because you've been the victim of that. So can you share about that?
Yes. Essentially, what happens is that these personality disorders are intractable, that once someone has one of these disorders and once there is an adult, they're not going to change. So if they've been disordered throughout their life, they're just going to continue to be disordered. Now, this is actually news because as going through the research, when I started educating myself about sociopaths, I kept coming across this information in the literature and the scientific studies that sociopaths burn out in their 40s and engage in less antisocial behavior. Well, this made no sense to me because my ex-husband was older than that when I met him. He certainly lied, and he all that he did, he perpetrated towards me when he was between the ages of 55 and 58. And then after I divorced him, he went on and scammed even more women. So this guy did not burn out. And as I talked about all the experiences on love fraud, and as I got feedback from all my readers, I heard the same thing from lots of people, that they were involved with these folks who were 50, 60, 70 years old and still engaging in this abusive behavior. So what I did was I did a survey of love fraud readers. There were more than 2,000 people responded, and I specifically asked about their experiences with people who they believed were disordered and were age 50 and above. And the feedback was that they don't change. In fact, one of the key questions that I asked was about 40% of my survey respondents knew the person both before and after age 50. So I asked them, how did the behavior change? Well, 91% said the behavior and lying and manipulation and deceitfulness was just as bad or worse after age 50. Mm-hmm. So the information from the field is that they do not change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And I love that you were able to really get in there and find this information out with your audience and understand this better. So how big of a problem do you think this is? Like how many, right, statistically, how many senior sociopaths do you believe are out in the world today?
Well, let's talk about the larger issue, which is how many sociopaths are there. Now, there is no real agreement on this, and nobody really knows. But if you look at the research, depending on which study you look at, it could be from 5.5% to 17.5% have one of these disorders that I'm talking about: antisocial, narcissistic, borderline histrionic, or psychopathic. And these are the people who I describe as sociopaths. Well, let's just take a midpoint for simplicity's sake. At 12%, if 12% of the adults in the United States have one of these personality disorders, that means we live among 31 million sociopaths. And if you look at the age group of 50 and above, it means there could be 14 million sociopaths age 50 and above living among us.
I'm not liking those numbers.
It's massive. And the thing is, they're everywhere. They are in all demographic groups. They're male, female, rich, poor, all races, all religions, all education levels. So that's why we really need to understand that they're out there, because it's statistically impossible to avoid them. We will come across disordered people at some point in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what are the things that are important, right? We know the statistics, we have an idea of how many people are out there that we're obviously going to be running across these people. What do we need to understand specifically about senior sociopaths to help us in our lives? Right.
So the key point is that once someone has one of these personality disorders, and the disorder manifests typically with puberty, and definitely by the time someone is a young adult, you'll start to see this behavior. They will not change. I mean, there is no therapy that is proven to cure antisocial, narcissistic, or psychopathic personality disorders. And we just need to understand that, because I hear from folks all the time who are in these long-term relationships that are never good. They're struggling. They're trying to figure out, why is it that it's just always unhappy? There's all this contention. There's all these bad things going on. And the answer is that the person is not going to change. Unfortunately, a lot of folks, like in my survey, most of the survey respondents were in romantic relationships, although I also heard from people who were discussing their parents, their family members, neighbors, and business colleagues. And especially in the family situations, folks are just devastated in these relationships, and they don't change. So what I want to communicate is that if you feel that you are involved in one way or another with someone like this, please understand that they're not going to change no matter what you do. You can bend over backwards, you can take them to church, you can take them to therapy, you can, try to accommodate everything that they want. It's never going to be good. So I would hope that people would use this information to decide how to move forward in their life in the way that's best for them.